Hi there, welcome to another Spilling the Tea episode. Unlike the last one, which was like fairly impromptu, I've actually tried to collect a bit of thoughts for this one. Right, this one's basically going to be about who I would like to add from each game, and I specifically went with each game rather than like a top 10 list from over the entire series, because it would just be like a cluster mess of, and might all congregate on a single game near the top. So it's sort of, to try and avoid that is why I'm splitting it into one from each game that's represented in Opera Omnia, and then one other that's not being represented in Opera Omnia at the moment. I'll give a brief reasoning over each one, so it may go into spoilers, so warning now, spoilers might be coming for these characters, specifically some of them later down the list, so yeah, just warning you now on that one. I'm going to be going like, doing the numbers and then tactics, Type 0, Crystal Chronicles, and then the other, and World of Final Fantasy all at the bottom. So it's going to go 1 to 15 and then onwards. Going to leave 16 out because we only know like a couple of characters, and I kind of want to wait for that game to eventually come out to see who I might want from that game. Type 0 is going to be not Type 0. Origins is going to be bundled in with FF1 because it's like just a reimagining of FF1 to something else. Final Fantasy VII, the entire compilation is going to be collected in the FF7 choice, just like 11, the expansions, same with 14, the expansions are all collected. If they have a sequel game, that's going to be collected into a sequel or a prequel game, it's going to be collected into a single choice. And gonna go from there. Now, these are obviously just my opinions and, wish list and everything of what I like. I will try and give some reasoning for why I want those in, because characters like Rikku, Red 13 and Sice, I feel like they will eventually be added anyway, so I'm not actually going to put them on the list, for example, for their respective ones. I just feel like they are going to be eventually added, it's just a matter of when. Whereas, so I went for those games, I went with some other choices, just to try and not make it as obvious. And so we're gonna just start off with the first game, FF1. Now, for FF1, the person I want most is Sarah, the Princess Sarah from the very beginning of the game, because she has probably the biggest ties to both the Warrior of Light and Garland, and just for story perspective, I sort of just want to see how she would interact going forward, because in the base FF1 game she's barely there, so it would be nice to see if she has any sort of personality going forward, because World of Final Fantasy did give her a personality, and it's like, ooh, it'd be nice to see that. So that's sort of why I want Sarah. FF2, I'm going to go with Minwu. Now, this one was actually a tough choice to go for, because I kind of want quite a few of the secondary characters that you briefly get, who also die off. So, but Minwu is like the first one. He's like one of the more iconic characters of FF2, and I couldn't think of any villain to go with Emperor with Leon in the party and everything already in the FFO. I think FF2 is sorted on antagonists, so it sort of just leaves, well, protagonists. We could have Minwu. It's a pretty obvious one. For FF3, I went with Arya. Now, the reason why I went with Arya is because she's so underdeveloped in her own game. Even in the 3DS remake, she's still underdeveloped. Like, they really, like, they even put her in the CGI. Like, Doga Anune and Sunday, they don't get in the CGI. It's Arya. Arya gets in the CGI, and yet she has tiny amount of story relevance. Extremely tiny. Like, yeah, she prevented the entirety of the world being completely gone by the Flood of Darkness by leaving that tiny speck. But yeah, I kind of want to see Arya just come into the FFO just to explore her more, because sometimes some characters just really don't get explored anywhere near the amount as I would like them to be. FF4, I would like Rubicante out of everyone, like even Teller over Sid, over other protagonists in the after years like Harley and so forth. It's like, the reason why I want Rubicante is while he's an antagonist, he's not like an evil antagonist, and it would just be like something to just bounce off of, and maybe add a little bit more, showing more guilt for Golbez and so forth. So it'd just be like really interesting to see how they might actually do like Rubicante and how he would interact. I also really like how his moves are flashy in the game, and they could certainly do stuff with buffs and debuffs with his Cloak of Flame and so forth, which could be very interesting. FF5, I went with Dorgain, like Bart's father, and the reason why I went with him is because I really would like to see how Bart would interact more with his father, how Galuf would interact with his father, in front of Bart's, around Bart's and all that stuff. Like, I just feel like it could be a really interesting scenario just to see how Dorgain would interact with other characters. Now, FF6, Umaro. Now, Umaro is there purely because I would love to see how the Des would do his kit. Like, just him picking up a party member just going yeet, and all that stuff. It'd just be like, yeah, it just feels like it would be a really fun kit to just see how they'll do it. But again, obviously wishlist and all that stuff, so who knows what will actually happen. For FF7, this one was a biggie, because how many games are in the FF7 compilation, including the remake and all that stuff. I went with Hojo, and the reason why I went with Hojo is all his ties to the characters, like all of them, like most of the cast of FF7 has a tie to Hojo in some way, shape or form. And he's pretty much the primary antagonist of not Crisis God, Dirge of Cerberus. Given that he was controlling the body of Vice the entire time, right the way up until he, gets offed, and so as well as him being like a secondary antagonist in the base 7, like Hojo just could have so many interactions, not just with the FF7 cast, but all the casts. Like Hojo seen like Leard from Revenant Wings, and just imagine what his scientific brain would try and do with that. It's like, imagining like Vincent just getting out his gun to immediately try and kill Hojo, just like not even second chance, and then everyone else who's not from FF7 just going, "Whoa, Vincent, what are you doing?" It's just like stuff like that. It just like gets my mind like really racing with what they could do with Hojo, and Hojo has so much potential in DFFO to try and do stuff with that I'm just like really interested in him. And so that's basically why I'm choosing Hojo over everyone, because he's got so much potential and I would just really love to see it. For FF8, I went with Adele. Now the reason why I went with Adele over Adia, over Ward, over Kiros and so forth is we barely know anything about Adele. And I kind of just want to know more. And DFFO could certainly do that. And that's sort of why I want to see if they will do that with, if they would bring in Adele, would they really explore her, or will they just leave her as basic as she is, which I hope they don't, because they've been exploring like more characters, just like they explored Ultimecia and so forth. It's like, it'd be really interesting to see how they might, you know, develop Adele, and then you could have Adele and Renoa interaction and see how that goes. That could be like really, really interesting to see. For FF9, I went with Kina. Now the reason why I went with Kina over Amarok is basically because I kind of just want to see the model of Kina and just like all the blue magic and frog drop and all that stuff going off, and that interests me and everything. So it's basically just a kit design, because Kina as a personality is not really there, and I don't think the FFO could explore that personality much either. So that's sort of why I went with Kina. Now FF10, there are a lot of characters. Obviously Rikku would have been a contender, but I excluded her at the beginning. So what I went with, between both 10 and 10-2, I'm ignoring Last Will at the moment unless there's a 10-3. But at the moment, I went with LeBlanc for an antagonist for FF 10-2. Now the reason why I went with LeBlanc over, say, Barreleye or Nuge or Gipple is because LeBlanc is a bit more comical, and it would actually be, when she comes in, she'll just be like, she'll go after Yuna briefly and then just realise, okay, I'm going to work with you. When she knows it's her way home and so forth. So it will just be a simple like, okay, we're off. Her kit being like, she could have a unique weapon with the fans and just see like loads of different fans. And they could honestly explore how LeBlanc is outside of her, a bit more outside of her LeBlanc Syndicate. Because yeah, in DFFO she wouldn't have Ormi or Logos with her. So it'd just be like sort of interesting to just see how she would interact with like plenty of other characters. Like, and who knows what she might do. Now FF11 was really hard to do, because I barely played FF11. Like, my experience with it is basically getting up to level 50 warrior, level 50 ninja, and then I just sort of stopped. So I barely interacted with the NPCs of the world or anything to do anything with them, which is unfortunate, because yeah, it's not really me giving them too much, the game too much of a fair chance. So I went with the basic answer of the Shadow Lord. Now the reason why the Shadow Lord, he was the first like primary antagonist, is just how would they do his kit and so forth. And that's basically it. Yeah, I went with the Shadow Lord because I didn't really have much else I could talk about. I'm sure other people could and be happy to, but at the moment I can't, I'm afraid. With FF12, I went with Larsa. Now with Larsa is pretty much down to, I want to see how his brother Vayne will react. It's more of a case of, I want Larsa to see how other people will react, like Vayne and Gabranth and Barsh and so forth, especially when they got their memories back and everything. So it's one of those really interesting type deals of just how would other characters react to them and so forth. Especially when they know they're dead and everything, and they might even legitimately ask Larsa how the Empire held out after their passing. And that's basically why I went with that. FF13, I went with Jill Nabat. Now the reason why I went with Jill is basically I really liked how she fought in 13-2, and I felt she was so underutilized in the base 13, and it's just like, kind of wanted to see more of Jill. And while we finally got that fight with her in 13-2, and it was a DLC fight, I still wanted more, and that's basically why I would like Jill Nabat added, is just basically to have more of Jill, to see what goes on and how she ticks a bit better. Like, she will be pretty much an antagonist for a little bit until she realizes some stuff, and until she really realizes how the world is going and everything and so forth. Final Fantasy XIV, very tough one, because yeah, I play a lot of 14, so this one's, and I want a lot of NPCs. This is where, if I did a top 10, most of the list will probably be 14 characters, and it's just like, okay, this is where I'm trying to avoid my bias. And so I went with the absolute top one, and it is an antagonist, and it is the popular antagonist, XIII. I really love XIII. I really hope he gets added. I don't like Xenos personally, so I would rather have XIII, but I know Xenos is the far more likely candidate and so forth to be added. But I just really would like XIII, so yeah, this is my wish. I wish XIII would be added, and that's why he's basically taken that spot. FF15, I went with the same sort of thing as FF3 with Lunafreya. I just really want Lunafreya to be explored more, like more as a character, more as a person, because that sort of just did not happen much in the base game of 15 at all. The fact that she was gonna have DLC that eventually got cancelled, so yeah, she just lost out on so much potential, and it's just like DFFO could explore that more, and I hope Lunafreya gets added, because I would like to see what full potential that they could do with Lunafreya. Like, it's one of those. It's one of those I wish sort of things, just to see. With Final Fantasy Tactics, I went with I can't even say the name. Blah 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 blah. Mustachio. And the reason why I went with him is how he would interact with other characters, like Balthier, Balthier and the other airship pilots, like all the technology and so forth, like Lightning's Gunblade, Squall's Gunblade. Like I would love to see how he would tick with their weapons. How do they get certain machines to function, and all that stuff. And that's sort of why I want Mustachio. Yeah, I'm sure if we do get another Tactics character in the next like 5 years, it will probably be Delita or Argath, just to have an antagonist from the game. But my wish is to have Mustachio. Now, Final Fantasy Type 0. Obviously, I excluded Sice earlier, so what I went with was Celestia. And the reason why I went with Celestia is she has a lot of relevance for a bit, and I would like to see how she would interact going forward. Like, because yeah, most Type 0 cast is all dead So, or most of the Type 0 cast is all dead. So it's just been nice to see another... Having another one dead is going to be no biggie, but it'll be nice to see her interact with how the end happened. And yeah, and obviously her moves can be stuff with her dragon forms. So yeah, like just seeing the character transform into dragons is kind of fun to see and so forth. So that's sort of why I went with Celestia. Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles. This one was a tough one because I've only played the Yuri's game and I've only played the base one that's been re-released on the consoles. And if I had to pick a single character amongst them all, between the two, it would either be Yuri's antagonist or Hurdy, and that's only because I don't remember much from Yuri's game, as practically no one apart from Yuri and Chilinka really stood out to me, and I had like in my mind like the brief part at the end of the game, whereas the console re-release is a bit more fresh in mind, and it's like I can't remember if his name is Hurdy or Gurdy. It's my mind keeps mixing them up because my mind does that, but it's basically the clever preacher who's a swindler, and the reason why I would like him is just to see what he would do to the other characters. Like, how would Kieran interact with him? Like, given that Kieran is meant to just be the basic male clavat, it would just be interesting to see how Kieran would interact with someone else from his own world. And that's sort of why I went with, like, Hurdy or Gurdy, whichever name it is. Just like the swindler guy. Right, and for the last choice, which is all the other ones, including Mystic Quest and all that, yada yada, the ones that are not featured at all in Opera Armia, I went with the Chocobo from Chocobo Street Dungeon. I can't remember if he has a proper name. I really can't. And he's going to be a very simple reason why I want them, and that's purely because I would want a Chocobo in a playable Chocobo in my party. Just that's all I would like. Basically, my only reasoning for it is I want a Chocobo. And that's basically been my list of all the characters and so forth that I would like from each game. If you got any specific characters you would like to have added to the game, just freely talk about it in the comments. I'm more than happy to interact, and yeah, just freely comment. Thank you for watching, and I'll maybe see you around. See ya!